I'm really glad that all of you came today. This has been such a fun journey. Alan and I started it off, and we've been friends for years on the internet. Now we're seeing each other for the first time on Zoom. And today we're going to meet Judy Chidester. Am I pronouncing it right?
Yes.
And Judy and I have known each other for like 20 years. She helped me with my book that some of you may know about. It's called The Guidebook to Rwanda's Volcanoes National Park. And Dr. Goodall also helped me with the book by providing some pictures and wrote me a really nice review. And so I decided several months ago that I wanted to pursue not only updating my book, but also I want to pursue actually making a mountain gorilla conservation center here in El Paso. And the vision I have right now is to see if I could get Amazon to sponsor it and actually build like an Amazon rainforest like they have in Seattle in El Paso. And then right in the middle of it would be a replica of the camp at Karasoke. So it would serve two purposes. It would help to promote conservation and encourage people to explore conservation opportunities in their life and around the world. And of course, it'd be a wonderful spot to be cool and to explore plants. Because right now, El Paso doesn't really have anything like that. So I said to myself, well, I just need to talk to more people and get to know more people and just keep this on my focus. So that's one of the motivations I have for wanting to organize this presentation, is just to reconnect with Judy and other people around the world who are interested in gorillas. We start by you telling the story of how you ended up meeting Dian Fossey.
Oh, yes. Well, Diane needed to come into the capital city of Kigali, and there was only one student left up there. She was coming in to meet more students. And she wanted a friend of mine, of ours, with the Red Cross to go up and stay with a little orphaned gorilla. But Liza couldn't get the time free. Her name was Liza Escher. So my boss said, well, I know someone that would love to come up. So I went up and I spent 5 or 6 days, which included my birthday that year, taking care of the little gorilla that was then known as Charlie, who they found out was actually a female. And
you can hold it up so you can actually show the whole screen, just
okay,
like that. There you go.
Yes. Charlie had a little box to sleep in the room. And every day I made him go out and walk, or her, and would walk with Diane's dog. And of course, the little gorilla would get too far behind and sort of pound his chest because he wanted me to come back and pick him up. And when I came back down the mountain, somebody who had worked with the gorillas said, did he always want you to carry him? And I said, yes. And he said, well, face it, you're the closest thing he's seen to his mother. So then we would take our long walk, and I would sit down in Diane's recliner and climb on my lap and go to sleep. I had to cover myself, of course, with a poncho because it wasn't house trained, but just would curl up there. But she loved to push that aside where she could touch my body. And this is a close-up picture of the little gorilla asleep on me, which I think for all the people who think of gorillas as ferocious animals, there's no possible way that you can feel that way about these animals. They are so wonderful to be around. And the little gorilla was willing to do most anything. Celery was their favorite food to eat, the wild celery. And Diane had a young a young African fellow who would go every day and collect things for her to eat. And she would just sit there, but I had to give her medication a couple of times a day because she had been in captivity for a while. But she didn't mind that because she got some berries afterwards. but she was quite a handful. She was, they think 2 or 3 years old, and she was sort of like a 2 or 3-year-old child, maybe weighed a little more than a 2 or 3-year-old child. But I thought it was good for her to get out and get the exercise of walking around there, around the place, and always had this mischievous look as though she was looking for the next thing to get into. she never had her mind stop working. She was not a dumb animal by any manner of means. That's right. Constantly watching just to see what was around and what could happen. But she was very accepting of most people who came around there because most people were there for her own good. And before I went up there, our ambassador went up and got to meet the baby gorilla. And this is a picture of Ambassador Robert Malone and Diane and the baby, who was then called Charlie, later called Bonane.
Now, this story about the baby gorilla is mentioned in the book, Gorillas in the Mist, but your story is not really told in that book.
No, and I don't know that she saved quite a few gorillas
right.
from poachers, but I know that was
this is
there.
the only one that was introduced in the wild
I
while you
believe
were
so.
there.
Mm-hmm.
And for those of you that have not seen my book, Judy's story is included in my book. And tell us about how the story got originally published.
Oh, yes. Oh, you mean originally?
Yeah, the story.
Originally, I wrote after experiencing this, I wrote an article for our State Department newsletter, and they published it with some pictures. I called it Getting to Know a Gorilla, but it was really, I made a lot of friends in the Foreign Service who contacted me after seeing the article in the State magazine. Then when I came here, Rick came to speak about the mountain gorillas, and I told a friend of mine that I was going, and he said, well, take your pictures. And I said, oh, this man doesn't want to see my picture. But when I got there, Rick was quite happy to meet me and hear my story. And he has made me feel even more lucky than I felt before of the experience of having it. And then after I'd gone through the time with the mountain gorilla up there, I went up one time with the students and got to go out and see group 5. And one of the small gorillas climbed up on my legs and then sort of walked away. But then the big silverback started toward me, and the little one ran back and got on my legs again, sort of like, now, Dad, this is my friend. And they got a picture of that, which is one of my very favorite pictures of me with the gorillas. The hardest thing was not to touch that silverback. That is the most beautiful, thick fur you could ever hope to see. But it was a real experience to be up there with all the students too. There were about 5 students there at that time.
Now, when you were there, were you actually with Dian Fossey at the cabin, or was she gone? Where did she go?
At that time when I went up?
Yeah.
Diane was away at that time with the students.
And then how long were you at the cabin?
When I went with the gorilla to take care of it?
Yeah.
About 6 or 7 days.
6 or 7.
And Diane came, she was there when I got there and returned before I left.
Oh, okay. So you saw her at the cabin.
With all the new students. Yeah. And when she was in Kigali, she stayed in my house.
Oh, okay.
So that was sitting there empty, and then my dog had company.
So can you describe what it's like, what it was like to live there at the cabin? You know, like what it was like in the morning, during the day and at night?
Well, it was just wonderful because, first of all, it got so cold on the mountain. I had never believed that I would go to bed with 2 hot water bottles, 3 blankets, a folded up sleeping bag, and an open sleeping bag over me. And when I finally got up in the morning, the little gorilla was quite good about not demanding a lot of attention early. I would sort of speak to it. They have their own way of communicating, and it would start sort of, I'd do the same thing back, and it would just settle back down again until I got up. And then when it came down from the little box where it slept, immediately wanted to be cuddled. So I would put the poncho around me so that she was covered with urine and stuff at that point, but she just wanted to crawl all over me and hug me and be hugged. And then the young African fellow would take her out to give her breakfast. And Diane had a houseboy that had worked with her forever. And he would come in and say, all right, your breakfast is ready. I had taken up eggs and bacon and things, and he would have this wonderful breakfast prepared for me, and I would sit down and eat it. And then I could spend the rest of the day walking around with the gorilla, and he'd tell me when it was time for lunch. And then dinner time, usually I would make dinner for me. And I don't remember if it was John Fowler or Peter Veet that was left up there with me, but it was one of those two. And I would cook dinner at Diane's cabin, and we would have dinner together.
Did you actually stay in Diane's cabin with
Yes.
the gorilla? So can you describe what it was like inside the cabin?
Well, the cabin was, of course, corrugated metal, but she had put sort of rattan hanging down on the walls inside, but there was no insulation. And I believe that through the years, when the embassy had furniture to get rid of, they had taken it up there because it was very American style furniture that was in the house. And she had added on to the back of it too. So there was another bedroom back there. And I believe that the second time I was up there, even though she wasn't there, I think I slept in the guest room. But she was very, very nice to me and explained to me just what to do for the gorilla so that he would be completely happy. And of course, I was in my 40s then, but I still had a lot of energy. So I would go out every day for at least 2 or 3 hours and have the little gorilla walk and build up his strength, because I felt that just sitting around the cabin wasn't that good for it.
Did you actually, like, when you took the baby gorilla for a walk, did you hold it by its hand or did you carry it?
No, I usually just walked. And that's when it would get upset if I got too far in front of it.
Oh, he would
stop and beat his chest.
Oh, he would follow you, or?
Oh, yeah.
He would just follow you.
And Diane's dog would go with us.
You would just, and you didn't have to worry about the gorilla running away. He would stay close to you. Wow.
He knew where his bread was buttered.
That's amazing. I don't remember all these points in our first meeting, so I'm really excited to ask you all these extra questions here. But what would be the most memorable moment you had during that week-long stay?
Oh my.
A bunch of them.
It was just 1 week-long moment. The experience of, first of all, meeting Diane, because I had been there in Rwanda then a couple of years and had never had an opportunity to meet her. And so to get to meet her and talk to her, we sat up very late the night before she left, and she talked a lot about her life and what she'd done with it and so on. And then just to be there, first of all, away from work, because I worked very hard and I had nothing to think about but the little gorilla. Even I didn't have to worry about feeding myself because the meals were prepared. So it was a true vacation.
Yeah.
In addition to taking care of the little gorilla. And I had to gather its feces and weigh them and do things like that. But it was all part of it.
But you were the only babysitter. In other words, when she left, but when she came back while you were still there. So she was only gone like a week.
Oh, I don't think it was quite a week. Well, they started to release it to one group, and it looked like it was going to be a bad experience. And Diane broke her own rules and jumped back down out of the tree and grabbed the gorilla and climbed back up.
So were you there? Did you actually see that? You heard the story, yeah.
And then they took it to the group that it eventually ended up with.
So after you finished this wonderful experience in your life, did you see Dian Fossey again?
I may have seen her once more.
Uh-huh.
But when she came to town, she would usually be at the ambassador's residence or something like that. But it was a real experience to have met her. And I know that my friend Anne Yancey, now Siret, who was stationed at the embassy and went up to see the gorillas, and I were in Washington when the movie came out, Gorillas in the Mist. And she and her husband and I went, and we must have stood in line 3/4 of an hour to get in and see it. Wow. And the part of the film that was about Rosamond Carr was actually filmed at Roz's house. Uh-huh. And we both almost broke down into tears when we saw that. Rwanda was a magic time of those of us in the embassy. It was still sort of, quote, old foreign service where everybody took care of everybody else. And we had wonderful friendships. And I probably have more long-time friendships with people that I knew in Rwanda than any other post where I served. How long were you in Rwanda? 4 years. So this must have been the highlight. Yes. And it was the first time in my Foreign Service career that I took 4 years. Normally we just served 2 years. But I had a lovely home there and wonderful friends throughout the international community. And everybody had their interests seemed to be similar. So. When you were at the research station, meals were cooked for you. Breakfast and lunch. Breakfast and lunch. But then what about, like, were there many other people there? There was only one student there. One student. And many workers? There may have been, but they never came around the cabin. Okay. The only one that came around the cabin was the young African fellow that was hired to get food for the gorilla. Mm. And he would also gather branches so that they could put, make a nest in that box. Right. Because the gorillas do that at night when they're going to sleep. They make themselves a nest to sleep in, and he would prepare that. So she was always comfortable and slept the way a gorilla would sleep. Did you hear any elephants at night? No. Or nothing like that? I never saw any other wild animals. Mm-hmm. When I climbed up from where we parked the cars to go up to the camp, which was from 8,000 to 10,000 feet, the guys that were going up carrying my stuff, and I had a cooler full of food and things like that, and I said, just go ahead, because there was a path. I didn't need to have them. But my major worry were the buffalo up there. Mm-hmm. I didn't see any elephants up there. I never even saw a buffalo. I never saw any other animals except some birds, and that was it. It was a pretty steep hike up there, right? Yes, it took me a little over 2 hours. Yeah. Then I certainly couldn't do that now. And were there a lot of buildings at that time? There was like the building for the researchers? I think there were 3 or 4 cabins. That's all there were. Right. I can't imagine, you know, as you look back and just talking about it, what kind of emotions you have about this experience. And I know you're really glad that we could bring this to this forum, and we're going to share this with even more people that are here today. If you were to say anything about Rwanda and the gorillas that you want people to know, what would you say to people about the country and about the gorillas? What would you want people to know the most important thing besides this story? Well, when I was there, it was a very peaceful time, but it's so beautiful. And the people, for the most part, were very kind, but it's like anyone else, their culture is so much different than ours. And I think that's some of the hardest things that certainly Americans have in traveling to places like that, is learning to live with and around the different culture. But I think it's so wonderful since the massacres that they have done so much for the gorillas. It's become extremely expensive to go up and see the gorillas. But I think it's wonderful that there are people there who really care. I remember in the last few years, there was a gorilla killed. And some of the guys who worked up there talking about it, and one of them cried. And I thought that is such a wonderful thing, to make those people who have so little appreciate these animals and their lives.